Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to go through the rods and reels I use for drone fishing. G'day guys. So I've noticed lately on social media rods have been a real hot topic for drone fishing, and you've got guys that say a shorter rod is much better than a longer rod and vice versa. So today I thought I'd just give you my opinion, go through the rods and reels I use and give you some feedback on what I found to be better, more comfortable and easier to use. And the price of my rods that I'm using start from like 150 bucks right up to 900. So let's get into it. So I just need to put out a quick disclaimer before we get started. I'm not affiliated and I'm not being paid by any of these companies to promote their product. This is just based purely on my experience and all of these rods and reels I've purchased myself. So my cheapest setup is a Fluger rod and reel combo. This is a Crank WA special, 12 foot 2-piece, big bait special, so it's rated for 50 pound, and it has a Salt 70 reel. This holds about, I think it would be about 250-300 meters of 50 pound. Not a bad rod. I prefer to use this off the rocks because it's a cheaper setup. I don't mind if it gets banged up a bit, gets a bit of damage, but more than capable for drone fishing. It's a nice stiff rod, 12 foot. It's got a bit of clearance for the shore breakers and whatnot. And the WA special in particular, I think it's discontinued and it's come out as a different. It's been rebranded. But this has a lot of power. This can stop sharks and all sorts of stuff. So if money is an issue, definitely something to look at, or the equivalent. The next rod is an overhead setup. So this is a Daiwa 50 wide Saltiga reel matched up to an Assassin Sabre. Okay, 14 foot. 20 to 30 pound. It's designed for casting, but you know, I'm more than comfortable using this for drone fishing as well. It's a 3-piece rod. This cost me $300, so not too expensive. The only thing I don't like about this rod in particular is it's very soft, so it has a lot of bend to it, and that can wear you out if you're constantly retrieving your baits over 300-400 meters long distance winding. This will tire you out a lot quicker, I found. Okay. The next rod is an Assassin Evo. This is bloody expensive. This cost me $880. It's a 3-piece 15 foot or 14 foot 7-inch rod. Very, very stiff. You can put a lot of pressure on big fish with this. And I have it matched up to a Saragossa 25,000 reel. Beautiful reel. This was about $400. I really like this reel. It's got heaps of capacity on it. Should probably go through the braid as well on all my reels. So this one in particular, I have 600 meters of 88 pound WFT braid, which I believe is discontinued, but really, really good braid. And I have, as you've seen in my last video, wind on leader of about 10 meters. Okay, so this is 70 pound and really nice setup. And then finally, whoops. And then finally I have a custom rod that I didn't build myself, but I designed it myself. I had a local guy manufacture it, and I have this matted up to a Saragossa 10,000. I also prefer on that rod to use my Van Store. So this is a Van Store VM 275. I usually have I have this stuff on it, spider wire camo. No particular reason other than I like to color code my rods and reels. So with that blue custom setup and with the Saragossa, there's a bit of a blue theme going on. So I wanted some sort of braid that tied in nicely with that, because I also use that rod and reel combo for casting. So when I'm casting, I'll use the Saragossa 10,000. Or if I know I'm only going out 200 meters, I'll also use that reel because I have the Assassin Drop Zone braid, 50 pound, spooled up, and it changes color every 100 meters, which I find really, really good. Especially if you get a big fish and it starts peeling line, you sort of have some idea of how much line is left on the spool. I think it's pretty important. A lot of people might overlook that. The Von Store awesome reel. I can get just over 500 meters of this 65-pound spider wire. Heaps of drag, and this was on sale for just under $300, so not that expensive. So I guess the big question is, what's better, a short rod or a long rod? And I guess it really comes down to personal preference. I don't actually know that there is a better or worse rod. It really comes down to what you prefer. I've tried shorter rods and they have a bit more power because they're not so long and they don't flex as much, which is fine if you're fishing out in the dunes or you're up off the beach. You don't need a super long rod to clear the breakers and get over the weed. If you're down on the beach, it may be more suitable for you to have a longer rod like the 14-foot Assassins I've got. One thing to look for when you're picking a rod for drone fishing is the thickness of the tip. So this custom rod I had designed, the tip is rather thick all the way through. So this helps prevent the tip of your line. This helps prevent the tip of your rod drooping and causing a bit of sag in your braid as it goes into the water, which is going to catch on any weed or any breakers that come into contact with it. The stiffer this is, the less this is going to bend and put that droop in your line, which is what you want to look out for. This Assassin Sabre, not as thick, but as I mentioned before, the whole rod setup is quite soft, has a lot of flex in it, so it's not bad, but it's not great. I bought it because it was the only rod in my price range that I was willing to spend to suit my overhead that I have. Come on! Help! Yeah! Yeah, I don't know yet. So, the custom rod that I've designed is fitted with 37 kilo guides. No issues with big fish, no issues with dragging a heap of seaweed. I know those guides are going to go the distance. That rod is really suitable for any type of fishing. I find the 12-foot size rods to be sort of in the middle of everything. They're quite a well balanced. They're quite a what's the word I'm looking for? Almost a one size fits all for beach fishing, drone fishing, all that sort of stuff. It just has. It's not too long and it's not too short for most people. The 15-foot setup, the Assassin Evo, love that rod, but it is quite difficult to cast if you're using it for casting. Using it for drone fishing, not an issue obviously. So another thing that comes to mind is the position of the reel seat. I personally like a low mount setup, and the reason why I like the low mount setup is I've been fishing for nearly 30 years now, and forever I've had a high mount setup, as most Aussie rods do. Especially with drone fishing, the last thing I want to do is have my arms stretched out almost straight position and at my shoulder length, or yeah, in line with my shoulders. Because if you imagine picking up a small 1, 2, 3 kilo weight and just holding it there, you know, it's not going to be very long before you actually start to tire out and get fatigued. So with a low mount setup, you pretty much eliminate that issue. You have the rod close to your body, you fish with bent arms, and when you need to, you can bring your arms up on the rod and lean into it and lock your arms or whatever. But for the most part, from my experience, I find having a low mount so much more comfortable. Even for casting, having that closer down to the butt section of the rod, you just have so much more leverage, so you can flick your lure or your baits or whatever it is that you're casting out with a lot more ease, a lot more comfort. When it comes to reels, I think a big spool capacity is quite important, especially if you're going out 400 or 500 meters offshore, because you need to factor in also if you get a big fish like a sambo or a shark and it pulls 100 meters of line, that you have enough capacity left. So when I use the 10,000, when I use the Saragossa 10,000, that has 300 meters on it. So I don't drop past 200 because I need to factor in if something big grabs it, I still have half a chance. I only got a third of my spool capacity left, and that makes my winding ratio a bit better. So I'm not cranking the handle for ages and not recovering much line because there's less line on the spool. So I would suggest maybe 14,000 or bigger when it comes to reels, just so you can fit as much braid or mono or whatever it is that you want to go with on the spool. And then try and, in my opinion, I would not go more than 3/4 of what's on your spool out. I think it's very important to keep at least 25% of your spool capacity back on the reel. When it comes to braid, there's also a bit of a mixed bag of what's better and what's worse. I prefer to go on the higher end of the scale, so 50 pound minimum for me. I like to know that I can put the drag on and lean into the rod and know that the braid's going to have a high chance of not snapping under load. A little bit extra abrasion resistance when it rubs over, you know, reef and whatnot. I mean, we all know braid's going to snap pretty quick in any case, but you know, a 30 or 40 pound braid versus a 50 to 80 pound braid, there's a bit more resistance in the higher poundage. The overhead setup I have is a mixture of braid and mono. So the bottom half of the spool has a couple hundred meters of 40 pound J braid on it, and then the rest of the spool's filled up with 40 pound mono. And I guess I prefer to fish with braid all the way down to my swivel because I like that feeling of being connected to the fish or having a better understanding of what's going on in the water versus a couple hundred meters of mono that's going to stretch and give. But at the same time, you've got that abrasion resistance. If the fish goes over a reef or goes over something sharp, that mono is going to take a lot longer to wear through than the braid will. So I guess it's a personal preference. Like I said, I fish with both, but I definitely prefer to have the braid over the mono. So to finish up with, I guess at the end of the day, it really just comes down to personal preference. If you have the ability to use a shorter rod and a longer rod, give it a go, see what you prefer. I'm in the process of designing a rod specific for drone fishing with a local rod builder. So keep your eye out for that in the near future. I have no idea of specs or costs or anything like that. It's still early stages. We're just throwing a few ideas out there. I suspect he's going to give me a couple of different options, different lengths, different ratings, go out, test and give some feedback and then decide what's the better option to go with. I'd love to hear your comments and see what you guys prefer to use, if you like a longer rod or a shorter rod. So I hope the video's been informative. I'm pretty sure there's a few things that I've missed. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we'll see you next time. Cheers, fellas.